friends, I'm Kyla and this is the Infinite Library and welcome to another year. I am really excited for this year, to be honest. I'm going into 2025 in like a really positive place, just in my life in general, mentally and stuff, and I'm really excited about all the books I'm going to be reading in this year. So this is going to be a TBR of sorts, but I'm not going to be actually saying what all the books are I'm going to be reading this month in January, because those are going to be a surprise even for me, because I'm going to be starting a new video series basically, which is going to be regarding tackling my physical TBR, which is something I wanted to do last year and got really distracted by the Goodreads challenge, and so couldn't really focus on it. And like many other people in booktube at the moment, I've seen and been really inspired by various like booktubers videos about reducing your TBR, such as Becca in the Books, Shelve It or Scrap It. We've got Gavin's and Bossa Tots. Riley Marie is doing a whole thing as well where she's getting through her physical TBR. And I will say, for me, this is not about getting rid of books. This is not about me trying to get my TBR down to zero. It's about me getting my TBR down to a much more manageable number. Like, I'm happy to have around like 50 or so books always kind of there that I can just pull from to read, but the number has grown quite a lot over the past couple of years. I've pulled a lot of books over the last couple of years, particularly in the last year, and it's getting to that level where there's just too many books and I need to sort it out. Basically, I need to focus on actually reading them and working out like which books, for example, are authors I like, which are series that I want to actually carry on with, that kind of thing, and obviously clearing books out that are just taking up valuable space so they can be passed on to somebody else who will actually like them if I don't. So I'm going to be starting that series. You'll probably see the first episode of that towards the end of January, and I'm just really excited, to be honest, because I feel like for me, having something that is like randomized actually motivates me to read more, because I'm excited about getting something that's spontaneously given to me and not knowing what your next book is going to be, and then getting excited to like find out what that's going to be. Like, I discovered this when I was doing like Spookopoly-thon, before any kind of like reading challenges where you pick books for various prompts and you all like rolling as you go to pick books. I found that really works for me in terms of me reading quite quickly and just enjoying the whole experience. Like, I am thankfully not a person who is a mood reader. Very occasionally I'll be like, I'm in the mood for like a horror or a thriller, or I want something that's maybe a little bit lighter if I've been reading a lot of said books, but I'm generally not much of a mood reader. So for me, like a challenge like this where I'm just gonna randomize what I pick essentially is really good. So yeah, I'm really excited for this. I hope you're all going to enjoy it as well. And yeah, there's lots of books that I'm just really excited to read, which I'm really happy to be getting to this year. So on to the books that I will be definitely still reading in January. As always, I probably have too many books and I'm being kind of over optimistic with this TBR, but we will start with the books that I will definitely be reading in the month, and then we'll throw in a couple at the end that are like kind of like, I'd like to get to these books. They're usually books that have kind of come over from last year, unfortunately, that I didn't manage to get to, and they're not like for anything in particular, so I'm just going to try and fit them in wherever I can, whether it's January, whether it's just throughout the year, I don't know. These may end up just being put on the TBR shelves to be added to that, but they're books that, for example, I pulled out of my TBR jar and didn't get to, and because I did pull them out, I would still like to actually get to them and not just have them get lost. That is the plan, really. And yeah, I'm just really excited for starting my own video series, working through my TBR, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So on to the books I will be reading in January. So I'm actually going to be starting the month with two fairly hefty fantasies that I've been meaning to get to for a while, and that is mostly because there is an author event happening, I think it's in Liverpool or it could be Manchester, I don't remember, but has written a book that has been an anticipated 5-star for me for ages now, and I meant to get to it last year and I just didn't, and now she's actually coming here. I want to actually find out if I like the book or not. So I am going to be reading Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan. She's actually touring because her new book, I think it's called Immortals, is releasing at the very beginning of 2025. But this is a book that I've just been desperate to get to for quite a while now and just haven't. I just have not had time. So because she's coming, I'm finally making this a priority and I am going to read Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I'm really hoping I'll like it. Otherwise, that will be an event I'm probably cancelling. But for anyone that doesn't know what this is an Asian fantasy. I can't remember if it's YA or adult, but it is about a girl called Jingyan. Probably mispronouncing that, sorry. But she's raised on the moon and was being hidden from the celestial emperor who exiled her mother from stealing the elixir of immortality. She ends up having to flee her home, leaving her mother behind, and so she makes her way to the celestial kingdom where she disguises herself as a boy, I assume, or I don't know, maybe they allow gay girls to train. I'm just assuming this is like that kind of book. She's basically on a quest to rescue her mother, and it just sounds really good and I'm super excited to read this. I'm not enamored with the UK cover, unfortunately. It was the American cover that really made me fall in love with the idea of this book, but I'm hoping I'll really like it and I think it's going to be a nice read. And then the other person who's going to be at this author event is going to be the host, I believe, and that is Eliza Chan, who wrote Fathom Folk, which is a book I'm not really sure I'm gonna like, to be honest. Like, I think the concept of it sounds really good. It's essentially a underwater fantasy kind of thing with like different civilizations going against each other, things like sea elves and various things like that, and it sounds really interesting, but I've not heard good things about it, unfortunately. But this is like the second time that I've seen Eliza Chan at an event, and I feel like I should just try and read her book at this point. So I'm gonna try Fathom Folk and I'm hoping I'll like it. I'm just not really sure if I am or not, because I've heard a lot of like people say the world building isn't particularly good, but I am interested. I figured I'll just give it a try anyway and see if I do like it or not and make my own decisions about it. That's how I'm starting off the month. I then have a couple of arcs that I'm going to read. One of them nicely coincides with an event that is happening in the month run by Gabby Reeds, which is Winterween. It is a week-long, just under a week, I want to say, readathon, basically bringing scare and Halloween into winter. So it is happening from the 10th to the 16th of January. You can find a link to the announcement video down below, but basically there's a bunch of prompts for this and I don't really have time to do a book for each prompt, but I have managed to find 2 specific books that are going to work pretty well, I think, for the prompts. The first of these books is an arc that I have, and I actually only have it digitally, but I did pick up, like, this is a chapter sampler for it that I got from Yalg, so I'll probably, like, begin it from the chapter sampler and then carry it on from the ebook version I have. But this is Children of the Night by M.A. Bennett, the sequel to Young Gothic, which I read earlier this year. I think it comes out in, I want to say February. Yeah, I think it's in February that it comes out. Exact date I'll put here. And I quite liked Young Gothic. I gave it a low 4, but I did have some issues with how some of the themes was presented. There were some themes of homophobia, of abortion, of grooming, and it didn't sit with me very well. I wasn't quite keen on how the only girl in the group was represented, but I am intrigued enough to want to carry this series on and see where it's going and see if those issues kind of get resolved a little bit more in the second book. So I can't really spoil to you what the second book is about, but essentially the first book was about these 4 different young people, 3 men, although I do believe he is possibly in the genderqueer spectrum, and 1 woman, and they are all famous, popular social influencers of various different kinds, but they all have links to horror, particularly classical horror. So for example, our girl Eve, who is this person right here, she had like a near-death experience and then she now is a booktuber that specializes in horror books. One is a popular singer who is linked to the Jamaican criminal underworld. We have a film tuber that specializes in horror but also sci-fi. And we also have a performer who specializes in like spoken word. He did like a whole bunch of like spoken word of Dracula, I think. So basically all 4 of these people end up getting invited to this like creative writing program, which is held at the original like mansion in Switzerland, which is where Polidori, Mary Shelley, Byron, Percy Shelley all collected together one summer, and where like Frankenstein was born from that, various other stories were born from that. So they're all supposed to be collected there to like create their own monsters, presumably to get creative writing, and it gets kind of weird and supernatural, and there's a bit of a murder mystery. So I enjoyed all the plot stuff mostly, but I just had some issues with what happened with the characters in the first book. But overall, I thought it was really good. So I am excited to see what's going to happen for these characters in the next book. I believe they're going to Transylvania. So that one was very more Frankenstein themed. This one is obviously going to be more Bram Stoker themed, which I'm very excited about. I'm hoping that we'll get some good character development here that I'll like for these characters. If not, I don't know if this is a series, like if it carries on after book 2, that I'll be continuing. But I liked it enough to want to give it another shot because I thought the writing was really good. I did enjoy the characters. For the prompts of Summerween, which I'll put here, this very nicely slips into prompt 2 and 3. 1, which is read a book in the dark or at night, you can do whenever basically, but this very much nicely slips into read a horror or a thriller, this is a horror, and read a book of a house on the cover or on the title. We have Dracula's Mansion here, so I'm going to say that counts. That is my first book that I'm going to be reading for Summerween. And then I've just got a bit of a backlog of manga, basically. So I'm just probably going to be reading some manga for the rest of Summerween as just like light, easy reads. So the other premises are to read a horror book published 5 or more years ago, and to read a novella, manga, or listen to a spooky audiobook. I was almost going to read Tama Maria Machado's In the Dream House, so I might try and squeeze that in, which would fall into that prompt, I believe. But I'm going to read some manga, and I figured why not one of these two, because I have all these from my friend. I have 4 volumes of Witch Hat Atelier to read, and I have like 7 volumes of Villains Are Destined to Die. This is a really cute, high fantasy, kind of cozy, but I feel like it's going to get quite dark, about a young girl who becomes a witch and is taught to be a witch. I really enjoyed the first volume of this, and I'm desperate to carry this on. And then this one is, I believe, a Korean webtoon originally. It's absolutely gorgeous. It is like full colour throughout, and this is that whole trope that we've had in otome games and anime recently, where a normal person ends up being taken into like a fantasy world, but she finds out that she is like replacing a character essentially in this like fantasy world. I believe it's a video game in here that she is obsessed with, and she ends up not being the protagonist heroine of the story. She is the villain, the antagonist, and in every single ending the antagonist basically dies in this game. So she is just trying to survive, and she like knows the game quite well, so she's kind of basically trying to like beat all the routes to try and not die. And I believe there is romance in there as well. So yeah, those are probably the ones I'm gonna be reading for Summerween. I might squeeze something else in just to hit that horror book published 5 or more years ago prompt. I do have a book that is in my TBR that I'm in the middle of that I'll probably be trying to read throughout the year because it's a chonker, so that would probably count because that was definitely published 5 or more years ago, but you'll see that later on in the video. So those are the books that I'm gonna be reading for Summerween. And then I have another arc that I need to get to. It should be quite an easy one because it is a graphic novel, and this is Song of the Lioness. And if you remember, Tamora Pierce wrote this kind of like middle grade YA series quite a while ago now. Like I read these when I was like in my early teens, I want to say, and it's about a girl who becomes a knight, and I really enjoyed that series, and I have not read them in a long time, but they're coming out with a graphic novel adaptation of it. So as soon as I saw it, I requested the arc because I really did love that series. I don't remember how it ended, but I'm super intrigued to see what it's going to be like in graphic novel format. So I'm going to be reading this as well. The next book that I need to read is of course for my book club. I've got until the end of the month for this one, which is good because it is a chonker, but I'm very excited to read it because it's a book I've been wanting to get to for a while, and it's a vampire romance fantasy. So this is the first book in a duology, and this is Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Trepeko. Basically, I don't know a whole lot about this series. I know it's poly. This is about a vampire hunter that is trying to investigate this new breed of scary mutated vampires, and ends up sort of getting embroiled with this like vampire heiress and her fiance, and yeah, I believe it's like a throuple kind of thing, and I'm fully here for that. These are the characters here, I believe, and I'm just really excited to read a vampire fantasy, to be honest. So yeah, this is what we're going to be reading for book club, and I'm hoping that I do love it because I have both books and I have high expectations, to be honest, but it honestly just had me at polyvampires. So there was also a new release that came out at the end of December that I am itching to get to. I've been like dying to read this book since I read the first book, basically, and unfortunately it got delayed quite a bit, but we finally have it in our hand, and that is Heavenly Tyrant by Ziron J. Zhao. This is a sequel to Iron Widow. It is quite a bit thicker, which I'm very happy about. I'm just so excited to go back to this world, to go to these characters. I'm not crazy about the new character who's being introduced because I am like so fully invested in the three characters in this book and their relationship that I'm not keen on the idea of another person coming into it, but I do trust this author, so I'm hoping I will like it. I kind of also feel like I should reread Iron Widow before I read Heavenly Tyrant, because I haven't reread this since I first read it, which was maybe like 2 years ago. And like, I feel like I do know it quite well, but I feel like there's going to be stuff that I've forgotten, and given how chunky this is, I kind of just want to refresh my memory on some of the plot points and how things work and what exactly the main character did, because it's a little bit hazy. So I don't know if I'll have time, but I think it would benefit me to reread this. For anyone that doesn't know what this series is, this is kind of YA, but it leans more adult, to be honest. I know the author actually pushed for it to be adult originally because she wanted to have certain themes that would be in adult books, but her publishers made her remove it to make it fit into the YA spectrum. But this is about a girl called Zetian who is basically living in this society that is very closed off, and there are these like mecha warriors who battle these aliens that come from about against the wall and are supposed to protect everybody. However, these soldiers are basically pilots that do these various mechas and stuff, and they have to like bond with somebody who is considered like a concubine pilot essentially, and they kind of end up killing them a lot of the time. And at the start of this book, our girl Zetian, her sister, has gone to be a concubine pilot and has died. So she is out on a mission for revenge, and she volunteers herself to be a concubine pilot to try and kill the guy that killed her sister. And it ends up getting a lot more complicated than that. I really enjoyed all the characters in this. I loved the world building. It was just so fun. I loved Zetian so much. She is such a badass. This book definitely goes into good for her territory. And yeah, I love this. This was one of my favorite books of the year when it came out, which 2021. I loved it. I'm so hyped for this sequel and to see what Zetian gets up to next. So yeah, I will hopefully be getting to this in January. I'm aware I've got a lot to read, but I'm gonna get to this basically as soon as I can. Now, I only have 2 more books that I want to try and get to this month, aside from what I'll be doing for my video series project. And then I'll just be throwing a couple of others in as extras that I may try and get to, but we'll see. So I have 2 arcs here that I got from Yalk, and they are being released end of January or in February or something, so I want to try and read them before their releases so I can actually give them good reviews. The first one is the one I'm most excited about, which is I Am Not Jessica Chen by Anne Liang, who I didn't realize when I got this. I was just very interested because of the cover, like, drew me in, and then when I found out what the book was about, I was super interested in it. And I didn't realize this is actually a very established author that has been in the Goodreads Awards for YA fiction quite a few times. She mostly writes like romances and dramas, I think, but this is like a mystery book, I believe, also going into a little bit of a supernatural thing. Basically, this book is about this girl called Jenna Chen. It's kind of seen as like the inferior one, and her cousin is like flawless, beautiful, everything. So everyone loves her cousin, Jessica Chen. Jenna makes a wish to basically become her cousin, and then it kind of comes true, but in a weird way. So she ends up becoming like the really popular girl, and then her cousin has just disappeared. And then she's finding out basically that Jenna's life was not as like charmed as she thought it was, and I guess there's a whole mystery around that and if she can get back. I'm really interested for this. I think it's going to be a really good read. So I have that one, and then I have another mystery thriller which also has a supernatural bent, which I didn't realize when I first got this. This is Needy Little Things by Chanel Desamores, and basically this is about how a bunch of black teenagers, I think they're all women, but I could be wrong, are going missing, presumed kidnapped. The police are doing nothing about it. Our main character, who is a girl called Saria, she can kind of like sense when people need things. And on her 18th birthday, she senses her friend needs pepper spray. So she gives her friend the pepper spray, and then her friend disappears. So she starts to kind of like investigate it herself along with her other friends and try and work out what is actually happening and where these missing people are. Those are all the books that I'll definitely most likely be getting to in January. I just have a couple of others that are basically just hangovers from 2024. I may also have a couple of the Goodreads books that I didn't get to. I have a suspicion that I'm not going to be able to finish all of the fantasy books. I'm filming this like on the 21st of December, so you never know. I may have got to them, but if possible, I'm trying to squeeze other books into. But I basically just have a couple of other books here that are books that I would like to get to because I was supposed to read them last year. So we have The Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks. This is a medievally kind of fantasy that I read once before, don't remember much about it. Feel like I didn't love it, but want to give it another chance to see if I want to carry the series on. Not sure I'm going to end up finishing this one, to be honest. It might be a DNF. I have Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, which I always forget what this is about, and it's never exactly what I think it's going to be about, but I am intrigued by it, and it's quite short. And then I have two books that I'm kind of still in the middle of and would like to polish off if possible. This one is probably not going to get done. I'm like 300 pages or something into Stephen King's It, and this is like over 1,000 pages. So I would like to finish this during the year, but it ain't happening in January, that's for sure. But I may read some of it this Halloween. And then I have Welcome to Dolly Hall, which I am like halfway through and really enjoying. I just have not had the time to pick this back up again. So I read like most of this whilst I was in Yalk, like on my coach rides and stuff, and yeah, I just didn't have the time to actually finish it. So I would want to get back to this before I leave it too long that I can't finish it and I have to restart it instead because I've forgotten everything. So yeah, those are all the books that I'm going to hopefully be reading in January, plus my mystery books that I don't know what I'm going to be reading yet. I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good start to the year. I've got a lot of variety here. Finally getting back to some manga, reading some highly anticipated books with Heavenly Tyrant, with Silver Under Nightfall, with Daughter of the Moon Goddess as well, honestly. I'm really happy, I'm excited for 2025. Feel free to put down below if there's any books that you're super excited to be reading in this year. Have you got any plans at all? And as always, stay safe, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!